sun in your face. You guys are waking up and about ready to start getting into the big day. But I wanted you to begin, first of all. I think many of us don't know what the SDG fund is. So perhaps a quick explanation of what that is, and then we get into the Malawi story.
Godfrey, thanks so much. It's really fabulous to be with you. Back in 2018, the General Assembly of the UN, so all the member states that comprise the body committed to equality and human rights for our world, decided they needed a new vehicle, a financing vehicle to help us all achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And the Joint SDG Fund since then has been trying really to bring Wall Street, to bring private sector investors, venture capitalists, philanthropists, pension funds, all your viewers, Godfrey, bring them to the sustainability and the opportunities that lie in Africa for investments that can really help end poverty, help increase access to education, healthcare, and all the other things so desperately needed in our world.
Yeah, and how has that gone in terms of response, in terms of funds raised, participation, interest?
Exactly. So we're capitalized at $275 million to date. That's the generous contribution of member states to the fund. Again, these are members of the UN. What we're now seeking, Godfrey, is the blending of that generous grant funding with the private sector asset managers. And I'm really excited to say that Malawi, and the example that we'll highlight today, is actually proof of concept. It's really showing that blended finance, where the UN through government monies can de-risk an investment, can actually change the game. It can really shift the conversation to allow portfolio managers, perhaps down the road here on Wall Street, to take a look at Malawi, to take a look at other countries on the continent.
Yeah, and help catalyze as well a further investment into the country. So let's talk about this Build Malawi Fund. Describe to us what it will do, because it was launched when was it? Last week, right?
That's right. That's right. We had an amazing event at the General Assembly last week here in New York on Zoom, unfortunately. What's historical, Godfrey, is that this is the first impact investment fund dedicated to Malawi. And this is open to local investors, pension funds. It's for market creation, and it's really to drive not only domestic, but regional and international investments into those actual households. We're going all the way from, discussing assets at the multi-million-dollar level, all the way into the small-scale farmers who we know struggle day to day to get their kids into school, to put a nutritious meal on the table, et cetera.
Yeah, and what are the targets for that fund? What sort of timeframes are we talking about?
So essentially, what we structured was what we launched was a structured blended finance vehicle. The goal is $35 million USD. The $6 million is the de-risking capital that comes from the Joint SDG Fund, and that de-risks the mezzanine layer that's open now to the commercial investors. And the idea is to open access to capital for the Malawian companies, building on decades of work. The UN has been on the ground there. UN Development Program, Food and Agriculture Organization, right? All of these market developments, extension services have been underway. Now what we want to do is really bring and mobilize financial resources right into the small and medium enterprises, where we know it's most important, and the impact in terms of a sustainable development goal achievement is the strongest.
100%. It's a conversation we try to have all the time here at CNBC Africa as well. So I wanted to know the sectors that you are targeting with this fund.
So specifically, it is the small-scale producers that are investing right into the supply chain. We have 37,000 households targeted. That's 75,000 small-scale producers. And we want to increase the income by those SME entrepreneurs and farmers by 30%. Looks like creating about 6,000 sustainable jobs, with at least 3,000 specifically for women and young people.
Yeah, so we're talking about catalyzing, we're talking about extrapolating here a little bit. I want to know if this is the beginning of funds for all 54, or I need to be careful, you're in the United Nations, or is it 55 territories? I won't call them countries. We know the politics around the Western Sahara. But I want to know if this is going to be taken beyond Malawi, essentially.
Absolutely. Godfrey, delighted to report over a third of our portfolio is already at work in Africa. We have $55 million to date already invested. That's in 38 out of the 54 countries that you referenced. I think a big part also that we do beyond this example of Malawi is that we're building a pipeline of other investable projects. And that's really what needs time, right? It needs time for governments, experts to come together to really identify opportunities that align with, in our case, the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah.
So, for example, in Madagascar, the government is very keen to create a sovereign wealth fund. And this will be incubating investments in renewable energy. So as we look ahead to 2030, 2050, we're all looking for net zero investments. There's many of your listeners who are looking to go green, to really align with ESG requirements.
Yeah.
The UN can offer you now a portfolio of projects on the continent that can actually meet that and produce a modest return.
Absolutely. In fact, our next story after we finish this interview is going to be about a small company. It's a mining company in the PGM space as well as chrome mining that has set its goals for decarbonization by 2030 and then also the targeting up to 2050. Very quickly before you go, I wanted to know if you are working on this alone or if you're partnering with other institutions like the African Development Bank, who I know is also working in this space, Afrexim Bank also in this space. I don't know about the African Union.
Absolutely. No, the Economic Commission for Africa based in Addis is a huge partner, African Development Bank, the World Bank, IMF. You know, we're part of the UN family. We represent the UN development system, and that includes all the agencies, funds, and programs, the IFIs, the development banks, also the larger European development banks and their pension funds and sovereign wealth funds are all part of the larger grouping that makes up really the international community of the UN. Godfrey, what we need from your viewership is we need those pension funds, we need those venture capitalists to give us a call. We want to show them our portfolio, we want to show them what we can do and how we can not only meet their ESG requirements, achieve the SDGs, but also provide a modest return.
Fantastic, Lisa, and thank you for appealing to them directly. We'll reinforce the message as well. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Godfrey. Stay well.
Thank you. That's Lisa Kurbiel.